Chapter 2. My son, if thou wilt receive my words, and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom, and apply thine heart to understanding, yea, if thou criest after knowledge, and liftest up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver, and searchest for her as for hid treasures, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord, and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous, he is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keepeth the paths of judgment, and he preserveth the way of his saints. Then shalt thou understand righteousness, and judgment, and equity, yea, every good path. When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul. Discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee, to deliver thee from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh froward things, who leave the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice to do evil, and delight in the frowardness of the wicked, whose ways are crooked, and they froward in their paths, to deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flattereth with her words, which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forsaketh the covenant of her God. For her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go unto her return again, neither take they hold of the paths of life, that thou mayest walk in the way of good men, and keep the paths of the righteous. For the upright shall dwell in the land, and the perfect shall remain in it. But the wicked shall be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it. In chapter 2 here of Proverbs, the overriding theme is that wisdom comes from God. Wisdom is a gift from God. Now you need to hearken back to the very beginnings of God's dealings with Israel and understand something all the way through. And when we're talking Israel, the individual, the man, used to be Jacob, is that wisdom wasn't some strange concept of how to behave. It was very easily defined as obedience to God. In all of Jacob's talking, all of his instruction, wisdom was being obedient to God. He recognized something. God was smarter than he was. And when you find somebody who is smarter than you are, wisdom is following instructions from that person. So that's what wisdom is in Hebrew thought and Hebrew wisdom literature. It is obedience to God. Now, we talked a little bit in the first commentary on the first chapter about how they tend to think of things in different images than we do. In Hebrew, the Near Eastern, Middle Eastern philosophy way of looking at things, you understand things, well, put it this way, in the West, in our way of looking at things, we understand things with our head, and we describe feeling things with our heart. In the Middle East, that isn't how it goes. In the Middle East, they understand things with their heart, and they feel it with their bowel. They have a gut feeling. Okay, we use a simple term, but we don't think of it in quite that same way. And so a lot of the imagery where it's talking about feeling things, we'll talk about bowels, or words that will convey that meaning. We talk about understanding, they talk about the heart, because it feels right to them. Okay? And that's how they get their understanding is, does this feel right? Okay? So for them, understanding is a feeling, not an accumulation of facts. Now there's a word that is used here, I think it's in verse 18, froward, F-R-O-W-A-R-D. It is a transliteration, a group of words from the Hebrew that are all combined. And the basic concept of the word froward is deceitful, dishonest, and or foolish. And it would depend on how it's used, which of those meanings it would have. But it's actually several words that are put together to make froward. And so you can be froward and deceitful, froward and foolish, froward and perverse, just obstinate, ignorant, arrogant, whatever. Froward can have all of those meanings. And then in this one, the last one we're going to talk about, is the concept of, and the words, strange woman. Now it has several different sets of meanings, images again. In the very first and easiest to understand, it can be used to apply to a non-Israelite woman. In other words, a woman who is not part of the covenant people. It was absolutely incredibly important to Israel to marry women of the covenant so that the children from that marriage would grow up in the covenant, that they would receive the teachings of it, that they would not worship false idols, because another meaning of strange woman is idols and idol worship, or untruth, or anything that takes you away from righteousness, anything. So anything could be referred to as a strange woman. A lie could be referred to as a strange woman. Some sort of stupid practice, worshiping idols, could be called a strange woman. A strange woman could also be a harlot, a prostitute. And it talks about, anybody that goes after a strange woman, which means anything that goes after something that is not of the covenant people. Something that is not honest and upright and approved by God for the Hebrew people. Was something that would take you closer to death. And they absolutely believe that. And it's absolutely true. In all of their history, it is absolutely true. Every time they married outside the covenant, every time they worshiped false idols, every time they didn't do the things that they were told to do, every time they broke commandments, every time they broke covenants, they headed for death. We've seen that in chapter after chapter after chapter after chapter of chapter. At this point in time, I'm about 400 chapters in, and I will bet you that at least 300 of those chapters have been problems that these people have had because they haven't been righteous. They have followed after strange women. They followed after foreign women, women that were not of the covenant, women that were represented idols, idol worship, women that were unchaste, women that were prostitutes, women that were really to take advantage of them, all kinds of these concepts that were there. And so it was really critically important to them that the fathers talk to the sons to stay away from every sort, type, description, or degree of anything that could be considered or described as a strange woman.